Was trying to arrange my hair like the character in the poster for this movie, but it's really hard. It's hard to look out of like peekaboo like this. How's this work? Okay, you can't see my eye. It's hard to read with my eye covered. Today's film for Noirvember was the neo-noir film The Last Seduction from 1994. It's mostly famous for how Linda Fiorentino received several awards and nominations for her performance. However, was ineligible for an Academy Award nomination because the film premiered on HBO before running in theaters. This was a very popular way for films in the 80s and 90s to get financed, was to have cable pre-sales, and sometimes they would do the release in theaters first and then go on cable, and this did the opposite and then screwed her out of an Oscar nomination, which is a bummer, especially considering something like a lot of the documentary that won last year that was made for ESPN, but they managed to play it in a theater first and then put it in ESPN, and then it was fine. Lesson: always play your movie in a theater first. It's written by Steve Berenick and directed by John Dahl. I think the only John Dahl film I've seen is Rounders, but I'm actually going to try to track down Red Rock West next and watch that one. This is still really hard. I hope you can handle the fact that you can't see my eye. In the film, Linda Fiorentino and Bill Pullman, love of my life, maybe not the love of my life, but the love of the 90s for sure, are a couple who live in New York and they want a better life. So they decide to sell pharmaceutical cocaine to drug dealers, take the money, and buy a bigger house. However, after Bill Pullman's character gets a little shooken up at the drug deal, he behaves badly with his wife and slaps her, at which point she is just like, fuck this dude. While he's in the shower, she steals his money and runs away. She finds herself in a small town outside of Buffalo, New York, where she's trying to hide out. She calls her lawyer and figures out that in order to use the money and it not become his, regardless of its legality, she needs to get a divorce. So she sets up herself as a battered woman. She gets a job doing what she's good at in an insurance company, and starts having a fling with a man in a bar who has a shady past in Buffalo that you later find out about. While there, she figures out ways to, her husband's trying to find her. He has a private investigator played by Bill Nunn trying to find her. She is finding other ways to make a quick buck, including finding out from the guy that she is friends with benefits with, played by Peter Berg, that he can tell just from talking to women whether their husbands have had an affair or not. And she's trying to come up with a way to sell insurance to women whose husbands they want to kill. She's a femme fatale through and through. The way the film plays with femme fatale tropes and noir tropes, I think, is really good. And I also think the way it looks at rural bigotry is also quite good. Where the film lost me was at the very end, and this is a huge spoiler. The shady past that the Peter Berg character has in Buffalo is that he married a trans woman. However, because this is 1994, they don't call her a trans woman. They continually misgender the character and call her a man and belittle him for marrying a man. Now, yes, this is 1994 and this is 2017, and we shouldn't judge things based on then, but this is 2 years after The Crying Game, where they managed to have a similar twist without ever misgendering the person. So it's possible to not do this, but also it makes me uncomfortable, whether this is an old movie or not, to see the trans community used as blackmail for somebody and to emasculate somebody. It's frustrating, and it's this is a revered neo-noir classic, one that has not gone away, one that is continually brought up and talked about, but I've yet to see anyone talk about this problematic aspect of the film. And that's what we do when we talk about films that had blackface, when blackface was an acceptable, I mean, it was not acceptable, but it was acceptable in terms of, 30s musicals, like they didn't bat their eye. No one was like, no one who had power was like, this is not good. But when we look at it now, we go, this was not good. And let's talk about how history changes and how, like, this was always shitty, but it was acceptable. And I feel like that's a discussion that needs to be had with this film because it's such a good film otherwise. But it's not a perfect film. And I can't call it a perfect film or perfect neo-noir and ignore how transphobic it gets. That's just not going to happen. So I almost wish I had known, because then I would have been less shocked and less upset, probably, because I would have been expecting it. I don't know. And maybe that's, commentary on the fact that she is so terrible that she would misgender a trans person, but I have my doubts that that's, what was going on there. So that's frustrating. That said, the cast here is great. It's Linda Fiorentino. She really is a femme fatale to end all femme fatales. Peter Berg is great. Bill Pullman is fantastic. Aspects of this film reminded me of Too Late for Tears, which has Elizabeth Scott and Dan Duryea. I think this is a great film, except for that, and I guess that keeps it from making it a great film. It's a good film that has not aged well in terms of its trans representation and demonizing of trans people. And having a trans character and not ever really talking to her, which is also frustrating because they just kind of had her. And then one interesting thing from the production history on this film, it was made to basically be a Skinamax film. And apparently someone at the company that was financing it watched the dailies and saw a scene where Linda Fiorentino was wearing, she was wearing suspenders over her nipples, and he supposedly said, what are we making, an art movie? And had the production shut down, so then they had to reshoot it with her wearing the same suspenders but over a shirt so that it was less arty. So that's kind of funny. Basically, I wish this movie hadn't had that as the big twist, because it was just not great, because everything else about this film is fantastic. And I guess I recommend it because it is a great femme fatale heavy neo-noir, but I have the caveat of it's also very transphobic. So take that as you will.